Hi, I am Claudia Castro Luna, and I'm a poet and a writer, and I'm happy to say I'll be doing a reading for ZoomMuse, Poets for Peace, on June 16th at 11 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, and I hope you could join me. So this is the book, and the image of the woman is actually taken from a mural in San Salvador at the Museum of Anthropology in San Salvador. It's an enormous mural depicting the history of El Salvador, and it's really stunning. And I haven't been back to El Salvador often since my family left because of the war trauma that as a result of the war trauma. But in one of my returns, I was taken to this museum and could not move away from this amazing mural. And so I'm really happy that now Grace is the cover of this book. That this is really the first book where I'm taking on a personal, where I'm being a lot more, it's just more personal. My previous book was about the Columbia River. The book before that was about femicide. It was a book titled Killing Marías, which is about the femicide at the US-Mexico border. That's an open verse. I mean, the thing that hasn't changed from the beginning is my love of prose poems. So I'm very much attached to that form, although I've moved in and out of that. And this book has both prose poems and open verse poems. But I'm really fond of the prose poem and what it could do. So that has remained constant. I think I was meant to be a poet. I started writing poems when I was in college. So I started college 2.5 years after having arrived in the US. So I was really an English language learner. And I was also a French major when I was a college student. So my really formal studies of literature were as a French major. So I studied mostly prose writers, but I began then to pen my earliest poems, and some of those early efforts were in French, I think as a result of just my head being filled with, French writers. And long ago, that was a long time ago. But the desire to write never went away. I mean, it presented itself then, and it just really pursued me for the rest of my life until after I was married and I, had gone back to graduate school twice. I decided this is something I need to do. It's not something that just went away. It just persisted and insisted. And at that point, then I gave up my work, my job, which I actually liked very much, and went back to graduate school and did an MFA in poetry. So it was really more that it wanted something from me rather than the other way around, I think. A good friend of mine who was a teacher, and at the time I was making that switch into going back to doing an MFA, is a Zen practitioner. And I was telling her this dilemma I had of giving up this good job I had to go be a student again. And she said, I think you're very fortunate. And she said, it is amazing that we should come into the world as humans, that you were not a worm or another being, right? But that you're a human, and that as a human, you figured out the thing that you need to do and want to do. I think that's really extraordinary. So I think you're very fortunate, she said to me. And I think you should go do this thing that you want to do. And I've never forgotten that, because I think she was right. I had a lot of trepidation, financial trepidation, all kinds of trepidations. And it was the right thing. It was the right thing to do. If I had had different writing mentors, not people that I knew, but writers out there in the world who were from Central America, who were immigrants, for whom English is a second language, I think I would have started writing a lot sooner. but there weren't very many writers that pointed the way to me as an immigrant Central American person to aspire to it. But that said, I think Anais Nin is a big inspiration to me. I found that I read Anais Nin in French when I lived in France as a French major. I think these are not poets, but they were people who inspired me. Zora Neale Hurston is a huge inspiration. Jamaica Kincaid also. So interestingly enough, not many poets in the people who sort of influenced me. You know, I could say Pablo Neruda as well, because I've read him widely. And of course, as a poet writing in Spanish, I find myself, even though I write in English, when I turn back or when I position myself, I see that I'm such a Latin American. You know, I've lived here for so many years, and yet I think that's who I'm, a Latin American, not anymore Salvadoran, because I've been outside the country for so long, but definitely when I face or position myself somewhere, it's that. So as a foreigner, essentially living here. This is the opening poem to Cipota Under the Moon. And Cipota is a Salvadoran word that means girl. So my father lives in El Salvador, and I have an enormous 2 volumes of Salvadoran slang. And I'm just so happy that somebody has taken the time to, codify the slang in that way, in a formal dictionary. So it's actually a very beautiful book. So Cipota means girl. And this is titled Agua de Beber. So water to drink. Once there was a girl who lived in a country called Fear. There, her fingers cracked and split into sharp mouths that screamed what she could not scream. Sometimes her hands itched and she scratched them viciously. With the scratching, her pores swelled. At peak moments, they burst, releasing the liquid within. The girl feared many things, but death, most of all, not her own, but that of her parents, through whom she saw and valued the world. That little girl is still around. She lives inside me, sneaking pistachio ice cream whenever she can. Now, when my hands begin to crack and split, I panic and recoil from the pain this causes and from the pain they cause the girl. Long ago, my hands learned to cry in my stead. They carved deltas at the tip of my fingers that took me to ocean. Oh, how deep, how vast the great water, how it sloshes inside my belly. Oh, how beautiful the world to which I belong. So that's one. And I will share another one. This book is divided into 4 parts. It's really a book about, it's an anti-war book. It's a war that argues for peace, and it is really focused on children, and because it's tracing my own experience of war as a young teenager, and my sister's, who was a child, because she's younger than I am, but also then looks at that extreme state violence, which is war, and then the violence in cities that we endure here in the US, right? And again, looping through all the sections, children's experiences, mostly my own, but also other kids. So really making, my hope is that people will realize that the results of violence such as this, the effect of violence on children, and how they are often the unintended targets of violence, and a violence that doesn't go away, right? The violence that I lived as a child, I'm still living through it. I still, I mean, that opening poem with my hands cracking happens all the time, that my hands split open and crack, you know, and that's because of that war experience. So I'll read from the end of, oh, here I could read, here, I'll read this. This is titled Lento. And in the house in El Salvador that we shared in a very small town with a volcano in the background on the northern part of El Salvador, about 12 kilometers from Guatemala, so very much on the border with Guatemala, we had a regal mango tree in our house. And so this poem, Lento, makes reference to the tree and the mangoes. My sister and I washed the oblong seeds clear of any remaining pulp, placed them in bowls with water, and watched the beard-like strands undulate in soft waves like tresses of an unconcerned mermaid. We gave them names, Tina, Sonia, Paquita, combed their hair in pointy updos, radial halos, and swept down along their bodies. Back in the water, dull spell over, their fibers loosened once more. Lento en pianissimo, the sweet lull of nothing days. So I really tried to capture moments where there was no war, where our lives were suspended away from the violence that the Salvadoran Civil War was, you know, for so long, and not just for the 12 official years of the war, but all of the lead up to it was an extremely violent time. So I really, more for myself, I think, than anyone else, I've really tried to work on finding those moments of peace. And that's one of those poems, where it's just two kids playing like they play anywhere in the world, you know, just lost to themselves. So those are two of my poems from the new book, Cipota Under the Moon. I hope you can join me when I read more on June 16th at 11 a.m. through ZoomMuse, Poems for Peace. And that is 11 a.m. Pacific time on June 16th. Hope to see you there. Until then.